All right, New York has been ground zero for a lot of ill-advised COVID policies. First, there was the unconstitutional and overly harsh restrictions on churches and other religious gatherings. Thankfully, the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in and slapped down then Governor Andrew Cuomo, who had to resign over sexual harassment charges. Now, the COVID legal issue the courts are tackling are the vaccine mandates from his successor, Kathy Hochul, and her refusal to recognize the religious freedom claims of healthcare workers.
There are not legitimate religious exemptions because the leaders of all the organized religions have said there's no legitimate reason, and we're going to win that in court in a matter of days.
Well, maybe not. But before we go to my next guest, just so the social media giants and the YouTube police don't raise a fuss and strike us, once more for the record, I'm not against the vaccine. I think everyone should evaluate the risk associated with the vaccine and the risk associated with not getting the vaccine if you're in a certain health situation, but that's between you and your doctor. What I'm against is people not being able to choose for themselves whether they need it based on their own health situation. I'm against big government and big business mandating this on the American people. Joining me now to discuss this is Liberty Counsel's Assistant Vice President of Legal Affairs, Roger Gannam. Roger, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Glad to be here.
So this is good news out of New York today.
Absolutely. One of the several lawsuits against the governor and her other state officials enforcing this vaccine mandate has now resulted in an injunction that will last for the duration of the suit until it's resolved at trial or in some other manner. But the judge was very clear that Governor Hochul can't simply say federal protections for religious beliefs don't apply in New York. That's exactly what she tried to do. And in that clip you played, it's priceless. Just the hubris to think that she can get away with it. But she's been put in her place now, not only by this trial court, but even by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which handles all the federal appeals out of New York. So she does not have a good track record on this issue in court. We hope that our own case brought by Liberty Counsel will result in the same outcome, and we think it will. So this is a good day for religious liberty, and all the litigation over the summer to open churches against Governor Cuomo's mandates. All those cases are now paying off with the good decisions we're seeing against this vaccine mandate.
So the last week, I think it was the largest healthcare or hospital system in New York fired, I think, some 1,500 employees for refusing to get the vaccine. Now that was based upon this mandate from the state, as I understand. Will those employees be reinstated until this case is fully adjudicated?
Well, that's a great question. The injunction so far is only against Governor Hochul and her other state officials, preventing them from enforcing the mandate. But we still have a number of large hospital system employers who are using that mandate as an excuse to deny religious exemptions. And as you said, many healthcare employees have already been fired as a result of that. They certainly will have monetary claims against those hospitals for violating their religious rights. Whether or not we can see any of them reinstated in the meantime is going to probably require more litigation.
So, Roger, let's say these healthcare workers who, for whatever reason, in this particular case, it's the religious exemption, they file a religious exemption claim, which is denied based upon the governor's claim. So at a certain point, the court is going to decide on this. And if the governor does not prevail and she is proven wrong that religious exemption should be recognized, will these employees then have a case to be reinstated and back pay, et cetera?
Well, there's two steps to this. One is just opening a religious exemption process for these employees. And that's what the current injunction against the governor requires. It requires that federal process be allowed so that everyone can apply for a religious exemption and get one if they're entitled to it. The next step would be evaluating each of those religious exemption claims. Many of the employees who've been fired so far just never had a chance at the process, and they certainly are entitled to that. Whether they get to go back to work and then request an exemption, or whether they'll just have to seek damages for back pay and eventual reinstatement through the court really remains to be seen. But there's no doubt that thousands of employees are impacted by this. And if there's any justice, these hospital systems will be paying them for the time that they've lost, having to be turned away from their jobs for not wanting to violate their consciences.
So it's safe to say that there's going to be a lot of litigation surrounding this.
No doubt. All over the country, wherever these religious exemptions are being denied, we're seeing hundreds of thousands of employees who may have claims against their employers. And as you said, New York is probably going to be ground zero for those claims.
So, Roger, I understand Liberty Counsel is about to file suit against the Department of Defense. Tell us about it.
Yes, as soon as tomorrow, we'll be representing several classes of military service members and other federal employees like civilian defense contractors who are facing these federal mandates to get vaccinated. And in many cases, especially for our military service members, their religious exemption requests just aren't even being received or considered. Either command or some other process is sort of put up against them, so that they're either told or it's strongly suggested that they not even apply for religious exemptions. So we're representing them in a suit that will be filed as soon as tomorrow against the Department of Defense, against President Biden, to force them to back off from this unconstitutional policy and allow the religious exemption requests to go forward as they are intended. No service member should have a black mark on his record just for asking for a religious exemption. And certainly no service member should be dishonorably discharged for refusing a vaccine that violates their conscience.
Well, with the deadline quickly approaching for members of the military to be vaccinated or be drummed out, that suit is going to be extremely important. Roger, thanks so much for joining us. We'll be tracking that one very closely.
Thanks again for having me, Tony.